So I've been playing World of Warcraft for less than a year, but over 6 months now. And a few months ago, I thought I'd dip my toes into endgame content. A lot of people had been telling me about M+ gameplay. A lot of people have been telling me about Mythic raiding. Obviously, I'm not there yet. Dungeons and general raiding. And so about 3 months ago, I thought, let's give this M+ malarkey a go. Let's have a look at this dungeon stuff. Because to be honest with you, in the months building up to that, I was just learning how to level and press the buttons on my keyboard. So today I thought I'd go a little bit over what my experience with M+ has been so far in the past 3 months. And it's been up and down the amount of playing. Sometimes I'll play more in a week, sometimes I'll play less. But ultimately, I'm not a hardcore gamer. I don't have tons of time to put into it. But this is just my experience and things that have helped me learn a bit more about how to be better at the game, but also the things that I think are hard as a new player. I think first and foremost, we'll go in with the obvious. Having come from playing console games mainly, and FPS and sports games largely, this MMO has been a whole new thing to me. All the buttons, all the keys, all the movement has been completely new and completely overwhelming to me, to be honest. People have been very helpful with guiding me in the right direction, with the right options of things to do. And I think as a beginner player, one of the best questions I asked people was, what's the easiest class for me to try and play to begin with? People gave all sorts of ideas and opinions, and when I originally asked, whatever, 6-7 months ago, I had no idea what people were talking about. They were talking about best rotations and best cooldowns and best timings and things that have the most utility and the best items, and all that stuff went completely over my head. But I heard a few that kept coming up, something like that. Hunter, Warrior, Paladin with a 3. I went with a Warrior because I'm mainstream and simple like that and just went with Warrior. And to be honest, Warrior was kind of nice. As I leveled, I learned how to press things. But as soon as I got to endgame content, I was completely overwhelmed. I found myself still using just like a single bar up to like level 70 or something like that. And so I was so used to just the same buttons over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, maybe left click, right click, middle mouse button, and that was about it. I had no idea about all the other bits and pieces. And to be completely honest with you, I kind of felt like the game didn't set me up for any endgame content at all, which I now find quite interesting, knowing that endgame content is so sought after and is actually, I'm not going to say the entire game, but a massive portion of why people play World of Warcraft, and kind of the direction that I'm now heading in is more endgame content. And so it was interesting to me that unless I had gone seeking out how to get better at the game, actively Googling or searching or asking or making content, which makes it easier, I would have had no idea how things work. The game does a very good job, I think, for new players of moving you through the levels relatively slowly, kind of quickly on retail, I understand. And so you learn to use your abilities. And this is going to sound really silly, but as a person who's used to playing normal games, story games, FPS games, sports games, you never read stuff, or you hardly read stuff. I shouldn't say never, I hardly read stuff. Usually it's just like left bumper, right bumper, left trigger, right trigger, AB, whatever. And the set moves are what they are. Maybe there's combos in some games like God of War or something like that, but generally it's pretty simple to pick up. With World of Warcraft, my brain has exploded because of the amount of information and nuance there is to each ability. 10% of this gives 20% of that. 20% of that for 5 seconds increases the boost on 3 other players for this amount of time. The cooldown of this decreases up by 10% if you charge this. If you combine these 2 things together, it activates this thing. And as a beginner, starting out, trying to learn how to do this slightly harder content, it was mind-blowing. And I think that's kind of a problem when you think about trying to get new people to stick with the game, to stay consistent, to stay with it, because everything to begin with feels really hard. And we can, you can ramp through the dungeons. You start low, start easy, build up your skills, go, go, go. But as people possibly with less time, what you want to do is go next, next, next. And it's it's an attitude thing, it's a brain thing. But sticking with things and feeling bad at things for a long period of time, I think for lots of people is quite off-putting, to be honest. And to begin with, for me, when I first got in, even like +0s, whatever you want to call them, or just general dungeons, I was just like, I have no idea what to do. I was spending so much time trying to dodge every swirly, trying to dodge incoming attacks. I didn't even know what my rotation was. I didn't even know how to press the buttons. And so it took a lot of asking and a lot of searching and a lot of Googling and a lot of research, which sounds silly for a game, to start building any kind of grips of how to play M+. But once I had, and once I'd taken a step back and actually people kept telling me what to do over and over and over again, something started to make more sense. And this next thing I'll talk about is very controversial. Some people will say, good idea. Some people will say, terrible idea. But for a while, and I still do sometimes, I use Hekili, that rotation reminder, just telling me what order to press things in. And for something like the Warrior, which I've used lots of, by using that for a while, it just reminded me that certain buttons are more important than others. What I was doing was using, a new ability that I've unlocked, like Slam, for example, with the Warrior, which basically I got told later on is pointless and I shouldn't be using it. And having that little reminder, which says, don't press that, press something else, can be helpful as a new player. So maybe think about trying that. I know that on the other hand, people who've been playing the game for a long time say that inhibits you, you become reliant on it. And I'm totally on board with that because that's me. I was totally inhibited by it as time's gone on. But that has changed as I've come away from it, and it's sometimes I just use it as for new classes so I know what is relevant and what isn't. And again, I know that it doesn't always get those things right. Anyhow, as I was saying, entering into M+ was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I'd never played a game before which required me to move so much and to keep an eye on so many things going on. To begin with as a new player, again, it's like a puzzle. Mythic Plus feels like a puzzle. Everyone learns, how things go, how the rotation happens, what abilities come when, what the mechanics of the bosses are over time. And I think what usually us gamers do is we do it through repetition, right? You just play, you play, you play. The problem I found with M+ is if you are pugging, or if you're new here, that means searching for a game with random people, it can be a really hard environment to learn these dungeons because people aren't really that forgiving in terms of being bad at the game. And I think that's a problem for World of Warcraft, like a really big problem if you want to get new people in, but when you play with lots of people, it's negative. People aren't going to want to keep playing the game mode. And I've been really, really lucky, and I'm fully aware of it, that I've had a really smooth, enjoyable progression through M+ because I've been playing with good people, and they're good players, and they don't mind if I'm bad. And those things are really important. And I think if you can find a couple of people who don't mind you being bad to begin with, that's incredibly helpful. 1, because they can teach you how to play. 2, because you don't feel the stress of it going on. And 3, you'll want to keep playing because if you do really badly, nobody's telling you to stop playing the game, don't bother, go back to the easy content. And I think that's really positive for me, but also detrimental for the game type, that people are scared of going in. And I've heard a number of stories and a number of instances where people have tried to do M+, but because of the toxicity within M+, now no longer play that. And I think that does range from beginners to more experienced players. And actually, I think sometimes at the higher tiers you have, people are more precious about their time, which is fair enough. But it can be a negative place. And so I think it's important if you're starting out, find a good group, a beginner group who are going to go through it. Or, in fact, find 3 other people who are also not very good, like me. If you want to play with someone else, me. And just roll through it like that. Enjoy it step by step. You can, of course, if you're deciding to be super analytical, go and play, watch all the videos about the mechanics and all of those things. But I think there's a problem with the M+ game mode requiring extra study. And I know that as people who like competitive games, and particularly people who are pushing high levels, people feel like it's their content. This is ours, right? I've done all the learning, I've done all the studying, I've done all the developing. So this is mine. Like, of course you should go and read up on it because I've read up on it. But I think there's a tricky balance to be made there between, like, is the game mode feasible for people to come and play for 2 hours and actually play it for 2 hours? Or is it a game mode where you have to study for an hour and play for an hour? And I think that's an interesting balance. And I know that it's not that extreme. You can just watch a 10-minute quick breakdown, or you can just do reps of it. And I will say, moving on to something positive, because I know I've been going in on it a little bit, The absolute best thing that I have done to get better at M+ Dungeon is the most obvious thing, and it goes for every single thing in your life. The more you do of it, the better you'll get at it. Learning the mechanics by doing it is the way to do it. The ones that I'm now the best at, and I won't say the best at because I'm really bad still, let me just preface, I'm still bad, or the ones that I can survive the most of are the ones I've played the most. They're the ones I've done the most reps of. So if you're feeling like you're terrible at the moment, keep doing the reps and you'll notice certain things. It will go in eventually, but it will take a number of repetitions and you'll say, oh, I know the boss does this now. I know this happens now. And I think it's a bit like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this. It's a bit like if you were building a table. Let's say you're building a table, right? This is how I look at World of Warcraft right now. And I'm lucky I have instant response, of course, through the stream and whatnot. But if you were building a table and you built the top and then you're like, how do I attach the legs? You'd probably search how to attach the legs. And I think that's kind of what you can do with this game. So if you keep, dying by the same mechanic over and over again, it's probably worth having a search, what happens here, or what can I avoid that with? Because to be completely honest, as a newer player, there was so many times that I was making really bad mistakes or I was going down simply because I didn't know about the buttons on my keyboard. I had no idea what a defensive was. What is a defensive? I don't remember the game telling me about defensive. I know that one of my spells does heals, but I hadn't read into the fact that one reduces my damage by 20%, one completely blocks damage for 5 seconds, one increases my enrage ability and therefore my ability to do more heals over time. I had no idea that you could buy potions. I had no idea you could keybind potions. And so all of these things you can learn by going, oh, how did that happen? And the reality is with those things, even though I'm saying that, I forget them every single day. Every single day, I will forget that I'm supposed to call a defensive. And I'm sure over time, as I've been doing it for, let's call it 4, 5, 6, in a year's time, maybe I'll hit my defensives regularly. But I don't think the game gives the greatest explanation of that. And it would be interesting to know whether there would be a way of tutorializing M+ dungeons to get people moving in the right direction to begin with, almost like a slow-mo mode. And I know that sounds silly, but like, imagine a mode where you go in to fight a boss and the whole thing is at 0.25% speed and it's happening and it's like, there's a slam ability. You see the bar charging. Slam's about to happen and then it pauses, it says, slam is about to happen, perhaps you could use a defensive or a cooldown. And then it tells you what they are. This does this for this amount of time. Pick the one, you survive it, opposed to if you don't pick it, you don't survive it, right? And obviously, when you have other players, tanks, healers, it changes because they might have more utility to look after you. But that's a separate thing, that's other players, and that's a whole other topic and other section to think about. But I think that would be quite cool for newer players, like a slowed down, slow motion version where you could learn the mechanics by playing and therefore not feel like you're wasting so much time of your play time for study time, if that makes sense. So that's just, just a little idea. Obviously it won't happen, I'm fully aware of it. I think the next thing to talk about briefly is really dealing with the setbacks of trying to play M+, and like, I think some days you're just terrible at the game. For whatever reason, you'll have moments where you're awful and it psychs you out and you don't want to play it anymore because you're like, there's no point, I'm not going to get any better. And I can't remember the exact name of it, whatever that bell effect is, or the Dunning something effect, where like you might feel good for a bit, you'll feel awful for a long time, and then slowly you get better again. And M+ is totally that. So if you're at a point where you're feeling really bad at it, it will improve if you stick with it. I think the next thing I want to cover briefly is literally about maintaining consistency as a new player. I have got the best at M+ that I've ever been because I continue playing with the warrior. I had been playing with a mage. I had been trying to level other things. I had been trying to play classic. And whenever I did multiple things at once, I got worse, is the reality. And I think I kept looking at videos. When you start getting involved and excited about doing anything, World of Warcraft, you want to search it, you want to Google it, and you want to know what the best thing is. How do I do things in the best way? And I made the really critical mistake of looking at the best classes. And when I looked at the best classes, I started thinking that mine was the worst class and that my damage was bad because it was a bad class, not because I wasn't very good. And so I flip-flopped. And I think if I was speaking to new players, what I'd say is pick the class you think is cool and keep using it and keep using it and keep using it. And then you'll be fine. And you'll be able to play through and you'll get better at using it. And if you flip-flop too much, it only gets harder. And I think this point goes hand in hand with my other point about take a break from it. Take a break. I know that I've just said be consistent and just keep doing it, but also take a break. I think I've learned that with World of Warcraft, it's pretty hardcore. People are hardcore with what they like and what they enjoy. And if you aren't fully involved, fully engaged in that way, and you feel like you have to be, you can be burnt out of doing one thing. So in some ways, go and play Classic, play some slow gameplay, some easier gameplay. I'm sorry, I know Classic isn't actually easier, but you know what I'm saying. Play some hardcore because it's funny, or it's hard, or it's scary, or whatever, and then come back to it. Give yourself a break. I'm not going to talk for too much longer because I've been going for 60 minutes already. But what I have, noticed about M+ is all the things that I've just said, and also that it's really important to remember with any competitive game that it is just that. It is a game. And for 99% of us, we aren't hardcore. We're not going to be professionals at it. We're not going to be doing race to world first, and so it's not that deep. It isn't. And I know that I'm saying that as a not so good player, but I would like to think of myself in 2 or 3 years' time, like the people who've been playing with me, and being encouraging and positive and not that angry if things don't go right in a dungeon. Is it exciting? Is it fun to get the best times, the best items? Yes, totally. But it's more important that the game stays fun. And I think with M+, there just feels like there's always this sprinkling, this weighting, this overarching or arching, whatever you want to call it, feeling that the message that's being put out into the general M+ community, not the professional community, is of doom and gloom, of this is so hard, we're not going to be able to do this is a problem, that is a problem. And I think the only thing that does is puts off the people who are never even going to be pushing the level which is that, is negative for that. I don't know whether I'm ever going to go past a +10. I've somehow doing +10s now, granted, good team, looks after me mostly, but +10s now, I can dodge stuff, I can survive the whole time now. Do I think I'm ever going to be doing +15s? Probably not. And so therefore, as players playing a lower level of it, I don't think we should get psyched out or deterred or put off of M+ simply because the state of the professional scene might be bad. I think we should just enjoy it for what it is, a bit of a challenge, a bit of fun, and an opportunity to get better at something. And the very last thing I'll say is, tip number 1 for new players who are just playing on PC, get used to your keyboard, get used to pressing things, and get a bloody armrest, because I get cramp in my arm from playing M+. Anyway, everyone, thank you for listening to me for 18 minutes. This is just my jumbled together sense of M+ so far, and I'm sure sorry if it didn't make too much sense, but I thought I'd just spit it out there into the ether. Anyway, everyone, thanks for watching. I'm sure I'll be back with some more yapping in future. Have a good day, rest of your day, everybody, and I'll be back in the next stream.